Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace with ilkas and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed to express some content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes. It's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason stay strapped with logic and fast. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason.
Brendan McAuliffe, and this is my co-host.
I think I'm Radio Paul.
Radio Paul?
Yeah, that's what people are calling me these days.
Also known as Radio Paul?
Paul Sheehan.
And today our topic will be Trump's new federal executive order for religious freedom, or
religious liberty. Yeah,
religious liberty. It's one of those terms.
Because they'd be persecuted.
Oh yeah, persecuted hard. Just like our atheist of the week, Stephen Fry. Unfortunately, as you are aware, Stephen Fry, and as many people are aware of Stephen Fry, he made a comment in an interview when asked, how did you want to respond to God when you saw him at the gates? He made comments such as calling him quite clearly a maniac, totally selfish, and words of that nature. And one anonymous man in Ireland filed a complaint saying that he broke the law by blaspheming under a 2009 religious freedom statute.
Funny, religious liberty in Ireland.
Oh yeah.
This is where we're headed, people.
Well, the law came about because until then, Ireland was a completely Christian nation, and it was actually to provide the same protection to Christianity as to all other religions. However, that...
Yeah, as if they needed that protection, yeah.
Exactly. However, it does not extend to non-religious people. So people are skeptical whether this is actually going to go forward. Maximum fine is 25,000 euros.
Well, no, just to remind viewers, Stephen Fry, in my memory, is a gay man who I also identifies as Catholic, and Catholic in the sense that it's like a heritage, culturally Catholic.
Yes, yeah. In the same way someone is culturally Jewish, I think he put it.
Exactly. And Christopher Hitchens was a friend of his, and lay into the Pope and the Archdiocese for saying, this man loves your church, but you tell him he's going to hell because he's gay.
Yeah, because of who he is.
Because of who he is.
Yeah.
And so, here's a man who actually cares about the religious faith, but is who he is, and then says that he thinks that if the way that Christianity is perpetrated upon him, he would tell people, or would tell that guy that he's a maniac. Somebody say he had him arrested.
Yeah,
because God needs people to do his dirty work.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is the guy who placed the report made sure to tell the Garda, the Irish police, that he was not personally offended. He only felt that Stephen Fry, had just broken the blasphemy law. And so that was the only reason why he put it forward, which actually makes me think, I might sound a little conspiratorial here, as he simply made this complaint to highlight this law and how ridiculous it is. Maybe that's me and my wishful thinking, or...
It's hard to tell at this point.
Yeah, exactly. All right. And so you had some other news segments.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the news. And this is interesting because this will lead into the topic for today, which is, of course, about religious liberty.
Yeah.
I have two Scientology pieces of news and a Bill Nye piece of news. So 3 Scientologists have been arrested in Tennessee. They were running something called the Life Center for a New Tomorrow, which is a detox facility in Tennessee. Now, our previous shows that we've covered on Scientology, we've gone into a few times one of their front groups called Narconon. And Narconon is a Scientology drug detox group. Narconon has faced somewhere like 30 federal racketeering lawsuits. They've had people put in, their offices raided. They've had people charged for fraud and crimes.
Is Narconon Narcotics Anonymous?
No, it's completely different. So what Scientology has done is they try to drop the name Narconon and try to give these little Scientology detox centers new names to make them seem as if they're somehow kind of more secular. And they've always tried to scream religious persecution when somebody goes after them, but when they're trying to sales pitch, getting people to come in, they go, we're secular and we're not religious. So they play both sides of this. Well, the people who run this are Scientologists, and what they did is they basically held a person for an extremely long time, months. And he wasn't just the only one. Well, he got a hold of a phone, he called 911 and basically said he was being held against as well. And so they go out and they raid this place. The state of Tennessee has shut this facility down permanently. And the interesting thing is that the technology that they use, they call it technology, really what it is their practices and beliefs, is that they have to isolate a person in a room where they're not allowed to speak, they're not allowed to have contact with anyone, there's total isolation. And then by doing this, the person will be forced to get into touch with whatever problems that they have. This is exactly what they put a woman through in the 1990s called Lisa McPherson, where she died. They held her for weeks, and eventually she dropped down to 98 pounds, had cockroach bites all over her body. They were playing audio tapes of L. Ron Hubbard, hours after hours every day. She just went insane and basically stopped eating and died. So this is one of the things where we'll go into a discussion later today on a bigger topic, which is, well, where does this religious liberty stop? The other thing I was going to talk about with Scientology, if people are paying attention to this story in general, is that Scientology seems to be looking like it's about to get into a war with the town of Clearwater. Now, there are two massive camps of Scientology in the United States. One's in Los Angeles and the other is in Clearwater, Florida. And in Clearwater, Florida, Scientology wanted to buy a large piece of property that used to belong to the Clearwater Aquarium. And the property's value was at like 1.2 million, 1.5 million. Scientology, after schmoozing all of the city council people, whining and dining the local business people, said, we'll pay you $15 million for this piece of land. And it's almost 15 times worth what the property was worth, and the town didn't go for it. And essentially, if Scientology had gotten this land, the idea was it would keep the public away from their compound, so the public couldn't see how destitute and empty their organizations are. It would also allow people like Tom Cruise to come there and not be bothered by the public. And the town of Clearwater, which has largely been co-opted by Scientology since the 70s, Scientology even tried to assassinate the former mayor of Clearwater named Abe Kazara. They tried to run him down and kill him at one point. They started fighting back.
Yeah.
And so Scientology is now instructing all their people that they can't shop at the local businesses. They don't want them on the streets. So, this is going to put a bigger wedge between the two. Yeah. So Scientology watchers, keep watching. And then our next thing I want to talk about real quick, because we only have about 4 minutes left, is there's a lot of discussion in the atheist community right now, and the skeptic community, about Bill Nye's new show.
The new Netflix.
Yeah, Bill Nye Saves the World. Mm-hmm. And so and I've been asked to make it clear that not everyone on this show, including our director, Brian, shares all of these opinions. So I'm being fair in saying that not everyone shares these opinions. And these are not necessarily even opinions, but there is very clearly a divide of opinions over what's going on with his show. Sometimes it seems to be very science-based, and sometimes it seems to be very social justice-based. He did an episode where he was had somebody lecturing white people about cultural appropriation, and then another episode he really got into the whole thing on gender issues. And some of the stuff he talked about with gender issues, there is some science-based stuff, but some of it stepped outside the bounds of science-based. And so he's caught a lot of criticism for that. And it's kind of interesting to watch because Bill Nye himself has been subject to, during the last science march, there were people trying to push him off the council because he was white and he was male. It wasn't a question of whether he was qualified. The people that were pushing him off even had less of a educational background than him. So it is interesting to watch what's going on with that. And I think it's also, again, I would like to just reaffirm to people that we need to be very careful, in my opinion, about excluding people because they don't share our points of views on things. I don't think Bill Nye is an intolerant person. I think he's very tolerant in a lot of things, but I also think that he can also fall into these traps about where he doesn't put up a good firewall between his political opinions and actual raw science. And some people get really agitated over that.
Well, yeah, no, and I think that's the interesting issue with things like the Science March, is you take away and you try to make and claim that the science is non-politicized, but then you forget that the science itself is not politicized. Like a proton is this size, is not a political statement. It's, however, if you take any action on that knowledge, it becomes inherently political. Whether you choose to move it, use the knowledge of the proton to create an atom bomb, that is taking it in one direction. Or if you use it to create nuclear power, that is in another direction. And so I think it's this problem of facing science and then saying, just because the act is based off of scientific data, the act is then not political and it only scientific, and that's not true at all. It's once you take a stance on it, it's political.
And that's one of the things I noticed about Bill's show, which is I could maybe completely support his position on, say, transgender issues, and I got no problem with that. But once he starts saying, as he did, it was asserting certain things are scientifically validated, and then he doesn't quantify that with actual facts, shows the data. That's where people start going, well, is this science or is this an opinion?
Yeah.
And the other side of this is that, the way that some of the stuff was done was fairly cringeworthy. They try to make it seem hip and cool.
Yeah, and they fall short.
And they've just fell short. And, but I think, again, the science of the show, some of the stuff that he's covered in there is really good. And if you want to see the show, I encourage you to see it. I'd be curious in our comment sections for this YouTube video version of this, or if you want to call in and ask a question or share an opinion, where do people feel about where the lines are drawn between pushing social agenda issues and pushing science? So, and I think with that, we're going to have to get ready to go to a break, and we'll come back, and as you were saying, we're going to talk about what again?
Trump's executive order on religious freedom, or religious liberty is the wording, I believe now.
When I was younger, I didn't want to admit I had a serious disease. Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue. But the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube, and remember to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Hi, welcome back to Road to Reason. I'm Brendan still, and I believe this is still Radio Paul.
Possibly.
Possibly, probably.
Yeah. I just heard Macron one. That's what our director just said.
Yeah.
So you heard it first on
Breaking
Road to
news.
Reason. Breaking news, man. Tune in every Sunday, 3 to 4 Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah. We need to get the tape down the bottom of the screen going. All right, so on to Trump's
We should
executive
though.
order.
Seriously, we should have like a tape with just insane, inaccurate crap rolling across the bottom. Inaccurate, just like made up garbage. Just like, homeopathy cures AIDS.
Yellowstone erupts, half of California gone.
Is gone. That would be so funny. I'm totally going to start doing that.
Let's give fake news.
Fake news.
Hey,
Trump's... You know what I heard? There's a pizza shop in D.C.
They're just down the street.
Yeah.
I thought they gave us money. We're not supposed to talk about that.
No. They have a sex dungeon in their
Soros
basement.
came by, right?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, on to real but even more terrifying news.
Yeah, real fake news. Trump's new executive order he signed, I believe it was Wednesday,
It's called the Religious Liberty Executive Order.
It's about 3.5 pages long. If we really wanted to, I could probably read the entire thing out.
But when it's Trump's writing with crayon, you only get like about 6 words per page.
Yeah, it's a lot of small words.
But it's fabulous. It's fabulous.
Oh, it's great. You're gonna love it.
Believe me, it's fabulous.
It's gonna be the best executive order
ever. Best.
And so, what is it basically saying? It's basically saying nothing.
Well,
was
that's
my
the kicker.
understanding. It's both absolutely stating nothing, and then also something.
Yeah. Well, what it really is, okay, and I've been reading about this all day.
Yeah.
Is that it? And this is interesting because the Freedom from Religion Foundation is already filing suit. They filed it the very next day in federal court.
Yeah.
But which is interesting because when you look at the other side of this, the religious right is freaking out because they feel it didn't go far enough.
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, Tony Perkins, the head of the Conservative Family Research Council, sees this as a political move only on the behalf of Trump. He doesn't really care about the issue that he had to do something for the religious right because he asked them to back him during the election. Now, but to answer your question up front, what is it? Okay, it is wording, and we're going to get into how this wording can still be dangerous.
Oh, there's definitely some major problems it presents.
But it's largely wording basically saying that religion is persecuted and they're going to put an end to this persecution. Yeah. As far as to how they're going to do this, we'll get into how they're going to do it in a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be very concrete in its language.
The worst part was a single section. I believe it was on, if you're reading along at home, it's the section 2, talking about 501c3s.
Yeah.
saying that, so right now, churches are not allowed to make basically political statements supporting one candidate or another candidate.
That's correct.
From the pulpit and still claim to be tax exempt. However, this new executive order allows churches to make political statements from the pulpit while being the fact that their 501c3 tax exemption status will not be
right, because that would be persecuting their free speech rights.
Exactly.
And that's the part that the Freedom from Religion Foundation is suing over.
Also, yeah, and it also exempts the Treasury from taking any action.
That's correct. In fact, this is interesting because the IRS was already not doing anything over this. In fact, Freedom from Religion Foundation had sued the IRS because they had no agents, no funding even.
For the Johnson Amendment.
For the Johnson Amendment to go out and enforce. And so what people know is what we're talking about is the Johnson Amendment, President Johnson signed this law which basically said that churches cannot preach from the pulpit and also have a tax-free status. Because in our country, if you are advocating for a political candidate or party, you're partisan, and therefore you cannot have a tax-free status. Yeah. And so what the Freedom for Religion Foundation did is they sued the IRS and said, you have to enforce this law. So the IRS has taken one person to court in 2008 over this. That's all they've ever done.
Yeah.
And apparently that amounts to unfettered, horrible persecution by the federal government. And I think it's worth kind of looking at who is behind this legislation. What was it that they were trying to get, what they didn't get, and how they feel about it? Because I think everybody's up in arms because, Trump signed this thing. And I think it is important to understand what he signed, but more importantly, what he didn't sign. And in February, there was a copy of this order that was leaked that was so much worse. It literally said that a federal government employee could discriminate against you because you had an abortion, that you were gay, that their religious beliefs superseded their duty to you as a citizen. They didn't have to render services to you. And this was not actually in the end in this order.
Yeah, the thing that I think happened was, the reason it was so anti-LGBT originally was, I almost guarantee you Mike Pence was the one behind writing the original thing. And then I feel like Trump and his advisors, Trump's advisors, went down and said, yeah, we can't say that, and then we can't say that, and then we can't say that. And the thing was, it might have been leaked on purpose to see how people felt about it. Because this administration right now is there's a lot of things coming out of it, and there's just been a lot of things coming out of it. It's very
actually leaky. It's been suggested that his family pushed back on him not to do this. Ivanka she's catching hell by the religious right for interfering in this and stopping the more horrible language coming out. But one of the people I thought that this was, first of all, let's get into what Trump said as he signed this law. Yes. Now, one of the people that pushed this and was standing next to him, applauding and nodding and encouraging him as he was signing this law, was Paula White. Paula White stood with Trump as he claimed, for far too long, federal government has used the power of the state as a weapon against people of faith, bullying and even punishing Americans for following their religious beliefs. We will not allow people of faith to be targeted, bullied, or silenced anymore. Well, isn't this interesting? Because the woman who, was standing next to him, White, had been the subject of a 2007 Senate Finance Committee investigation led by Republican Senator Charles Grassley into whether televangelists had used tax-exempt donations for self-enrichment. After an outcry by the religious right claiming undue government interference into religious affairs, the committee backed off the investigation. So what I'm really seeing here is that they don't even want to be questioned for breaking the law when it comes to embezzling this kind of money, because anything they do should be exempt. In fact, a lot of these religious people are claiming that they shouldn't have to adhere to any secular laws.
Yeah, because it's interfering with them doing God's work or whatever it is. Such as the case coming out of Alabama recently. Earlier in April 12th, a bill was passed through the Alabama Senate allowing a particular church, it was a bushfire church, allowing the church to set up its own police system, who could carry weapons and make their own arrests to protect their large estate, as they call it. It's more like a compound, and all their various subsidiaries. So they've got their main church, and next to it they've got a school, and then next to it they've got a bookstore. And they have various kind of locations and so, like satellite. Yeah,
they're trying
places.
to treat it like a college campus. They want their own kind of campus police force.
That was the reasoning behind it. Their lawyer, Mr. Eric Johnson, who's also a member of the church.
Of course.
According to the Guardian newspaper, he made the statement that there was the need for such defensive measures because of. He referenced the church bombings by ISIS of the Coptic Christians in Egypt, as well as the Pulse nightclub and the Sandy Hook attack.
So what he's saying
one
is
in Egypt by radical terrorists, one
against a gay club,
against a gay nightclub, and then one involving.
What's going on in that church, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, a mentally ill person shooting a elementary school. Notice he didn't reference the Dylan Roof shooting of an actual church, but we all know that why that was.
One of the interesting things with this, which is nothing prohibits this church and its properties from having a private security force or any of these people, especially in that state, where the Second Amendment, you can do open carry, concealed carry. Nothing prohibits this. The danger is in giving them state authority
to arrest people. Yeah, it's more than a mall cop. It's
they carry. Whose court are you going to go to when they arrest you? You're going to go to the secular court.
Yeah, people are already talking about this being used will probably be used to cover up some crimes. Just like the last time I was on here, I was talking about the church in North Carolina, in which the head woman of it was charged with kidnapping, and there was all this sorts of assault charges on this small congregation, and they covered it up because it was all self-contained, and they were allowed to be self-contained.
Yeah, they had a case out in Utah where a Mormon, one of these de facto Mormon churches, as it was marrying underage girls, had their entire police force were members of this congregation. And literally, the state had to go in and disband the police department because it was just so corrupt, and they were covering up so much abuse. And this is what, when you hear about religious liberty, this is what this is what these people want. And I say, okay, if that's really what they want, fine.
Yeah.
They want to scream total separation of church and state. You get nothing from the power grid. You get no waterworks. You don't get a secular police department. You can't use our courts. You can't use our fire departments. You see how long that church survives on its isolated land.
And see, the church just really wants the ability to sweep the bodies under the rug. It wants to be able to police itself, but at the same time then use the benefits of
what they want. Yeah, they want the
society.
state doing their bidding, and they want to be in control of the state by claiming the state can't tell them what to do, but they want to be able to tell the state what to do. I want to be able to vote and tell other people how to vote and who to put in charge, so we can make broad social policies. But you can't tell me that I have to keep my religious opinions to myself in that scope. I mean, it's mind-boggling that we're at this place.
It's this kind of preaching and this servicing of a newfound religious right is very interesting, very troubling as well.
Well, we have a note up on here as well. Someone has pointed out that they love how advisors catch flack as if Trump isn't responsible for himself, and that's true. Trump, Trump ultimately is responsible for signing this order.
Oh yeah,
he is ultimately
put his pen and name to it.
He put his pen and name to it, and he encouraged these people.
Of course,
and he's empowered them by putting people like Pence as a vice president. So, if you look at the original leaked order, though, this thing is so watered down compared to what it was. And I think that this is where it's important to take a look at some of the grief he's also catching from the religious right. I'd like to read a little bit about that. Religious conservatives are, in fact, divided over Trump as to whether he's their savior or whether he's betrayed them in regards to this. Leading religious right figures on his faith advisory board were tweeting about this, and very angrily. Ralph Reed, chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition and the head of the board, praised Trump for bold leadership, although he admitted the executive order is just the first bite of the apple. So he's one that was kind of like friendly towards him, but I can't even it's like the irony of a religious guy talking about biting of an apple, which is like the original sin. It's just kind of hilarious. It also, it's funny too, because when you think about Trump, Mr. I'm going to ban Muslims or people from Muslim countries is now worried about religious liberty. Give me a friggin' break.
Oh, yeah, no, it's really interesting to see who on the religious right has a spine and tells Trump that this is terrible, and who's like, oh, no, it's totally good. It's totally, like, who the sycophants are. It's really, really funny.
But other people are lashing out.
Very revealing.
David French, a senior writer at the National Review, called the order worse than useless. Ryan Anderson, a senior research fellow and leading figure on these issues at the Conservative Heritage Foundation, deemed it woefully inadequate. In contrast, the leaked February draft, Anderson wrote, made good on many of the president's promises to protect religious liberty from government penalties. Robert George, the Princeton professor who has been at the forefront of the right on these issues for years, was even more blunt. In a tweet, he called the order meaningless, adding that it was a betrayal. Ivanka and Jared won, we lost. Adding to the perception that the president's daughter played a role in scaling back the extensive provisions. Let's see here. They made other references to the religious leaders knew. He literally never mentioned the Johnson Amendment, adding sarcastically, I guess the good news is that when the ACLU shuts down the Catholic hospital in 15 years, priests will be free to endorse Ivanka from the pulpit. I mean, these are just like spoiled children who didn't get their way.
Well, no, it's really funny because now that Bannon seems out of the picture, there's Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the Jew, kind of seems to be sneaking in and tempering it a bit, though it's becoming a really interesting presidency.
Well, the religious rights claims of religious persecution date back to at least the 1970s, when the Internal Revenue Service revoked the tax-exempt status of Bob Jones University, a Christian fundamentalist school in South Carolina, over its campus ban on interracial dating. Because we know God don't want, Jesus don't want the blacks and the whites dating.
Bob Jones University is notoriously bad. You're not allowed to hold hands. If you're a male, you're not allowed to hold hands with a woman on campus. Well, they have a handkerchief rule, which you have to put a handkerchief between your hands.
And one could argue that that's like some insane inside church thing. But when a church is asking for state funding and they're making political speeches saying blacks and whites should not be getting married, and even yesterday, even on Wednesday, religious conservatives pointed to Bob Jones' case as evidence of government overreach and of the risks of of losing one's tax-exempt status if the government, in their view, disapproves of a religious teaching. It's like, damn right you should lose your tax-exempt status if you're going to kick somebody out or penalize them because they're dating someone with another melatonin skin color. For crying out loud.
Yeah.
But they're persecuted.
Yeah. Why can't we hate these people?
Why do we give such credit?
Get along.
Such credit to people's religious beliefs that if I rock back and forth and I hear a voice in my head telling me that I should exterminate midgets, and it's wrong for people that have dark skin to marry people who have light skin, and that I mean whatever the crazy shit that is supposed to be worshipped, and we're supposed that you have to respect that because it's his deeply found religious beliefs. Where does this insanity or this need to cater to this insanity come from? It's like you want a tax exempt status for telling people, and the crazy thing is these people are pointing to that case as saying we're persecuted because we can't have blacks and whites not date.
Yeah, it's a very, very poor hill to die on. It's
and they're
ridiculous.
ready to die on it.
Oh yeah, well it's the point of the rapture. But again, it's really interesting because legal experts are saying, this is according to a CNN report, legal experts are saying that the executive order will have no change on policy or its enforcement or anything. The only thing that it does change, it says according to Mr. Lawrence Noble, the general counselor for the Campaign Legal Center, he states that the executive order allows the IRS to restrict the activity it currently considers political, but prohibits the IRS from expanding the restrictions to cover activity not covered before the executive order. So it's saying basically they're doing as before, and they can't expand what they consider to be basically preaching from the pulpit.
Right.
They can only restrict it.
Well, I mean, one of the things, and I'm going to get into it here shortly, is the direction that this order and what the government has said, the direction of giving federal employees on how to implement it. And that's the dangerous side. It's like, people think, oh, well, an executive order can just overwrite laws. No, it actually doesn't. What it can do is it can...
it changes the enforcement of it.
Yeah, or it instructs people on how to enforce laws. Like, for instance, Obama, we had breakfast this morning. We had talked about how Obama was one of the first presidents, not one of the first, they've all done it, but he was one of the ones that really used executive orders a lot to rule by decree versus making executive orders this is Groundhog Day or whatever.
Yeah.
An example of this would be is that Obama, say, didn't like firearms. So he would do an executive order saying things like, he would instruct the Bureau of Tobacco, Alcohol, and Firearms to stop funding federal background checks for people.
Yeah.
And then therefore those people couldn't legally purchase a firearm. Or he would instruct them to put a particular company on a ban list from importing firearms. So this would be an executive order, and then so that department then would go out and they would say we have an interpretation, or
it's a policy move.
The law might say, we're setting a law that says the Bureau of Tobacco and Alcohol and Firearms can enforce gun laws.
Yeah.
Then the executive order says this is how you're going to enforce them.
Yeah.
This is essentially what we saw with this situation going on with Trump, which is the wording of it was largely meaningless. I mean,
it's a symbolic gesture.
Symbolic, which is bad.
Anything.
And I have to find the part in here in a minute, but there are actual instructions already coming out telling that the Justice Department will start interpreting this to mean this, and we will start enforcing it to mean this. I'll find that in a minute.
Yeah.
But I did want to finish reading, though, where we're talking about how the religious right's reactions to this. At the National Religious Broadcasters Convention this year, it was they brought up the Bob Jones case. And they said, could the IRS under President Hillary Clinton, for example, revoke nonprofit tax status of a Christian school because they teach marriage as a union of a man and a woman? could they revoke a license from a Christian radio station so you wouldn't be able to be eligible for Christian broadcast messages over the airways because they're discriminatory or they've been decided to be homophobic or transphobic. And that's how they're selling the fear of this.
Yeah.
Which is like, you want to take our rights away to be homophobic and transphobic and discriminatory.
Yeah.
It's like, do you not see the problem here?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is do you just let him be a jerk, but like, let him be a jerk in the corner, or is it being like, no, you can't do that, guys.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, I mean, they're like, we're persecuted, and
Yeah.
they're the ones saying.
Oh yeah,
They're the ones saying.
The largest group of people in the world.
Yeah, they're the ones
Christians
saying.
are definitely.
Yeah, they could like do stuff like say that we're going to lose our broadcasting license because we're homophobic or transphobic. It's like, I got news for you. Don't be homophobic and don't be transphobic and expect protections as a 501c3.
Yeah, you can't. It's a having a cake and eating it too. Like you can either discriminate but not expect anything the rest of us wouldn't,
right?
Or you can not do that and not have to pay taxes.
I mean, but it's like they're like claiming they're persecuted for not being allowed to be bigots and intolerant.
No, it's really it's a whole cluster.
Okay. So I found that part I wanted to read. Okay,
Yeah.
It says, while the order does not specifically single out sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status as grounds for discrimination, as the draft once did, it still contains a sweeping provision that could be used to that effect. In order to guide all agencies in complying with relevant federal law, it reads, the Attorney General shall, as appropriate, issue guidances interpreting religious liberty protections in federal law. According to White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders, it directs, I mean, that name just terrifies me.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
Yeah, Sarah Palin, Mike Huckabee. You know, there's too many combinations there. But anyway, she says it directs all federal agencies and departments to protect religious liberty. Excuse me, I'm going to learn English any day now. Please don't deport me, Mr. Trump. And free speech, consistent with guidance to be issued by the Department of Justice. Okay, so this is where you see the insidious side of the executive order.
Yeah.
It's not a sweeping thing that tomorrow we're all going to have these religions jumping down our throat. What it is doing is it is changing how the federal government
reacts
enforces
and
as you said, enforcement with this. And we're going to see fallout from it. And that's where the Freedom from Religion Foundation is kind of jumping into this. So.
Yeah, you said that they had already created a lawsuit, correct?
Right.
In federal court?
Yeah, they've already, the very next day they filed federal suit over it, and I think it has more to do with the, with religions being shielded from losing their 501c status.
Okay, so it does say it's more of a protection for the Johnson Amendment that this executive order seems to be trying to gut?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
because I have there's a quote from the Interfaith Alliance president, Rabbi Jack Malign. For decades, the Johnson Amendment has prevented houses of worship from being turned into partisan political tools. A majority of clergy and Americans support the status quo and oppose political endorsements from the pulpit. President Trump's executive order reportedly aims to gut the Johnson Amendment and clear the way for the religious right to weaponize their churches for partisan battle. So the question is then also, are you going to see politicians rise from the pulpit? Are you going to see the altar boy running for Congress, who then gets to stand up and speak to the congregation, and they all vote him for city council member or state
I think
representative or
when you
something?
have places like Alabama trying to make their own police forces, that becomes evident that will happen.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to put a private military in a community.
Well, not create their own private kind of parallel legal system or military system. I'm saying it allows them to have a greater kind of jump start into a political future. So you can
but that police department, it's not private in the sense that it's actually private, but it's private in the sense that it's being controlled by the church.
Yes.
The church is proposing it. They're the ones that are going to be putting the edicts about what laws are enforced and which ones aren't.
My point is, I'm saying, say the Alexandria Lutheran Church has one particular member of it who's running for state Congress, state Senate. And so with this, they're allowed to then say to their pastor, hey, I'm running for a position, stand up at the pulpit saying, I support these things, you guys should vote for me. And the thing is, I'm not sure whether that then is covered or rather no longer covered.
Right, what I'm saying though is if that police department is allowed to stand, and in conjunction with this order, it would reason that also would follow.
Yes.
Which is they're going to say, we already have a precedence of religions already just having public officials being, elected, appointed by religion. That police force is an example of that. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is, you, the state, have no authority to intervene. We have every right to preach it as we want.
Well, and that's the funny thing was, not so long ago and still today, you hear cries of creeping Sharia law and how those Muslims are having their own parallel legal system and stuff like that.
Hey man,
then
religious liberty, baby.
Exactly. These churches and congregations are asking for the exact same thing. Yeah. Because obviously their version is right, and the whole thing about Muhammad is not, and it's utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, now I'm reading from The Nation here, and it is interesting because I think The Nation is taking a very kind of academic view of this.
The Nation, the magazine?
Yeah.
I didn't know if you meant The Nation as a whole.
Our nation is just effed up.
Or I thought you were going to say highly academic.
Very academic. But they're talking about here where Trump's vague directive to the IRS to not enforce the Johnson Amendment. Yeah. I think that is pretty accurate. I mean, he's done this vaguely, but then the question is, if you are subservient to the president and to the people in his council, you don't need to be given explicit directions to not enforce something. Yeah. I mean, you only need to not enforce it. The complexities come from when you enforce it. What are you allowed to enforce? How hard do you enforce it? What's considered outside of the bounds of what's acceptable behavior.
It's not so much an on-off switch. It's a dimmer switch.
But when you say vaguely to not directive to not enforce it. Not enforcing it is not enforcing it. There's no restraints on that.
It's a 3.5-page document. It is such a short piece of it's such a short document that it is barely able to accurately. It's not some scalpel deftly cutting at the excesses of American regulation on churches. It's not. It's just some big brick that Trump just dropped in the middle of the room, and everyone's like, what was that for? And Trump turns to the pastor and says, I thought you wanted a brick. And he's like, no, I wanted a gold brick.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because even amongst evangelical whites, the repeal of this amendment is actually unpopular. There's a very small clique of evangelicals who really are latched onto this. And I think because even a lot of Christians get that their particular version of Christianity may become really unpopular in their community as they're a minority. Yeah. Like, let's say that you're Mormon, okay? You might be all for this if you live in Utah, but if you live in Virginia, it's not going to be such a good piece of legislation for you.
No, and that's always the allure of secularism, and that's why people of faith actually are and do support secularism. It's the idea that you might not be the big person in the room, forever. It might be someday that someone else with more power who you vehemently disagree with or are frightened of comes to power, and just kind of hedge your bets for now so they don't go crazy with the power.
Yeah, I know that as well. He also tried to tie in some of the contraception stuff with this as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to go, because I think we're already trying to figure that whole stance out with the new healthcare and such they're trying to push forward, and the budget they recently pushed forward.
Yeah, but the way that this law, this executive order is, he also kind of like that, the day he signed it, he was championing those sisters or whatever.
Oh, the Sisters of Charity.
Charity that Hobby Lobby was involved in. And he was talking about their religious freedoms, and he was holding that up as an example of persecution. And, so this is going to embolden the religious right to further discriminate against people who don't share their points of view. And that's the question. It's like, okay, it's illegal to discriminate against someone for their religious beliefs. But if I'm an employer and I have a religious belief, am I protected to discriminate against you and your religious belief? What if I'm a particular religion and I have to have an abortion? It's like, you're going to not hire me? Are you discriminating against me? I mean, that's an bizarre extreme, but the point is made. It's there. It's like, well, who is it that gets to discriminate and who doesn't? And
it also goes into the whole idea of what is then a company allowed to do? What are its hiring methods? Like, is it allowed to say, well, we don't want someone who thinks this way to be presenting our company, our brand, or our products?
Yeah.
Is that then legal? Is it legal? Would it be legal for a church to have a Trojan condoms as a sponsor?
I love it. I love it.
Exactly. Or is Trojan condoms allowed to have a priest on the board? I just see, and these things are so kind of.
And this is what people don't get. We're kind of joking about this, but the reality is that these people, the arguments they make, are so flipping bizarre.
Oh yeah.
That you could apply any of this nuttery to anything. It's like they say, you cannot tell me what my religious beliefs are. I and I alone get to decide what they are. And you, as a state, don't have any rights to say that I can't influence elections. And if I say, and this is why I love Pastafarians, they want to get their pictures taken in their Department of Motor Vehicle,
with the
pictures with their spaghetti strainers on their head, the colanders. And the state has said, well, you're right, we don't have a right to tell you not to wear a spaghetti strainer on your head when you take your DMV, because that is your religious right. And it's like, any level of insanity is tolerable, and these people want that environment. They want the environment where they can behave and act and do whatever insane thing they want, and nobody can say or do anything to them.
Until the Satanists start putting up a statue, which then everyone starts crawling all over themselves to figure out what is going on and how do you stop it.
And Trump is always just this minefield of brilliant asininity when he's speaking. You have to ask yourself, where did this man get educated? One of the things was,
we went to Penn.
Well, I mean, and I don't agree that he's a great businessman. He's driven. It's like my mom. Mom, I love you, but my mom is now an expert on taking care of plants. Do you know why she's an expert? And she'll admit to this. She's killed so many plants that she now knows what she's doing. That's how Trump is with business.
Oh, that's the thing, is he went bankrupt in Atlantic City 3 times. I mean,
but this is how he speaks about when he was at Value Voter Summit previously. He was talking about repealing the Johnson Amendment would be a boost to Christianity and other religions, like a rocket ship.
Yeah,
I'm like, seriously, dude, like a rocket ship?
The man's not very good with words.
Yeah, you see, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the Johnson Amendment, and it's going to be a boost to Christianity and other religions, just like a rocket ship.
It's going to go right over the...
What a great analogy, man.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, the guy paints. Paints with words.
I never thought of it like that before, but now that he's explained...
Is the rocket to get over the wall?
Yeah. Oh, my God. You know what? What if
Mexican Catholics?
No, worse. Mexican members of ISIS, dude.
Mexican members of ISIS. Oh.
And they're like shooting over Trump's wall
in
a
the rocket
ship.
that Trump gave them. That's not good.
I don't know, man.
This doesn't sound very good at all.
I don't know, man. Oh my God, what are we gonna do with this guy?
No, and I mean, to sum it all up, and to say exactly how this was, a group, the ACLU, that group, basically stated that the new executive order was a photo op. It was purely so that Trump could say, "Hey, look at me, I'm doing things for you," and then kind of just stepping down. Then it's a worthless, absolutely. It's a virtue signal, being like, I still didn't forget about you, Christians, so still don't forget about to support me.
And that's the interesting thing, because the FFR said, that they want, they're going after Trump in this lawsuit. They said, if Trump wants his lawyers to march into a courtroom and say that this executive order doesn't mean anything, then that's kind of defeating the whole point of signing it. So on one hand, yes, it is largely toothless. On the other hand, it is also dangerous. So it's kind of like he had to pay back the Christian right for their support, but at the same time, while he neutered it, it is still dangerous. It's not as dangerous as it could have been, but it's like he wouldn't have done this if it didn't have some teeth on some level. Yeah. And I almost would rather he had actually made an executive order that could have been challenged in court the same way his Muslim ban did, which is it affects actual immediate real-time people like trying to come to this country. The problem with this executive order, it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with how Obama was doing his executive orders, which is it's internal government agency, so you almost have to wait now for it to actually cause a problem so that you can show harm and then file a specific lawsuit to address that issue. And it's like, and I think that'll happen. It's just a matter of time.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it is a change in policy, and that change will have a real world reflection.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. We've all been trumped.
We've all been trumped.
We've all been trumped, yeah. And again, it's just mind-boggling that people walk around and they support this guy and they say, "Oh, we want a Muslim ban, but we want religious freedom."
Well, people describe it very well as politics is about the feels. It's all about the feels. I feel this guy's protecting me, so I'm going to vote for him. I feel these people are going to attack me, so I'm going to vote this person to protect me. I feel like I'm not being given enough of a say or my fair say, so I'm going to elect this guy. And it's just been this. It's all about people's reactions to current events, and it's not what it actually says, because anybody who would have actually read it would realize. Who said they support it would realize that it's a worthless thing to support. Like, I mean, unless
well,
it's
I mean, there was that one religious guy. I have to go
support.
back and pull up my notes. He actually thought it was a good. He said it was the first bite of an apple.
Well, I mean, obviously that guy is.
But it just shows nobody's happy with this.
Well, no, we see in the administration plenty of people just tried to suck up to the our new Lord.
Lord Sith.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're wrapping up the show. I just want to remind people to visit us on our Facebook page, give us a like. Visit our YouTube videos, subscribe to us, give us likes. Aaron Ra, who was on our show last week, did a great episode with us. We want you to go and check out that video if you haven't seen it. Give that a thumb up, share it. It's surprisingly not doing as well as some of our other videos, which I don't understand. So. But you can help make that a different situation. See you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Adios. Arrivederci.